Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today I have something really fun for you. So, Baldur's Gate 3 has an achievement called Jack of All Trades, which is for getting one of every single class level, one level in every class, without respecking during the game. This is a super rare achievement. I think only like 0.5% of players on Steam have gotten it, and I suspect that most of them cheated. So I thought, what if we could make a build that would make this sort of insane hodgepodge of classes somewhat viable? I actually think that I've done a pretty cool job of getting a build that will be tactician-viable using one level of every class to work. This build, just to warn you, will use two specific items, but they're both very easy to get, and I will tell you how to get them early in Act 1, as well as one feature of a class that can be seen as something of an exploit. It depends on sort of where you fall on how you feel about this, but we'll talk about that when we get there. I'm using Jaheira as the example character, both because I had the save file ready and also because she has the soldier background, which I think is a pretty good one for this build. It gets you two skills that you're very likely to want. For your main, since this build will always be on your main character, I recommend going with a wood elf or half wood elf for your racial choice because the extra movement speed is just so powerful, and because this build will play out primarily as a tank, you are going to need to get into position very easily. This build will sort of play in three distinct phases. For levels 1 and 2, you're going to play as a pure archery build. For levels 3 through 6, you are going to play as a secondary healer and tank, and post-level 6, you're going to transition to being a full support spellcaster and tank with a bunch of options for defending your allies. I will talk a little bit about how we make each of that happen as we go. I should also let you know that I am taking build requests, so if there's anything else you want to see optimized, do let me know, and I will make that happen. So, to start off, our very first level that we are going to pick is going to look a little bit weird, but we're going to start with Paladin. There's two reasons for this. One is that Paladin gives us access right off the bat to all weapon and armor proficiencies, and one of the advantages that this character has is you get heavy armor and shield proficiency, which gives you quite good AC. This character will never be winning damage prizes because you never get feats, you never get extra attack, because you never hit level 4 in a class, you never hit level 5 in a class for extra attack, and you never get high-level spells, although we can mitigate that in some ways. But what you do get is a ton of AC and different skills and features from level 1 of every class, so we have to maximize those as much as possible. Paladin gives us all of our armor and weapon proficiencies and shield proficiency right off the bat. It also, because we're a main character, it's nice that it gives us some party face skills, because one thing this character can do is have quite a bit of utility in making skill checks in conversations. For our subclass, we're going to pick Oath of the Ancients, because Healing Radiance is really good. This is going to allow us to heal our allies, and this character makes a pretty good secondary healer. And then for our stat split, we're actually going to do something really weird. This is going to look quite bizarre, but bear with me. So for our stats, we're going to go with 8 strength, very odd for a paladin, 16 dexterity, very odd for a heavy armor character, but because we're going to play as an archer for the first couple levels, it's really good, and it also gives us solid initiative, which will serve us very well throughout the rest of the game. 16 constitution, almost every character, if you can afford it, should get 16 constitution, and then 8 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 14 charisma. If you are playing alongside another character that can do conversations, you could maybe move the charisma into the wisdom, like do 14 and 12, but I think this is pretty good. It will get you quite solid saves and good conversation skills overall. For our skills, I think you want athletics, because one way this character is going to be able to contribute to combats is by pushing people into pits. That's a really good way to help in a combat, and you get 2 conversation skills and insight, which gives you a solid array of conversation skills for the early game. You will play as an archer, so just find the best bow that you can find. You should be able to get a light crossbow somewhere on the ship and use that for the early game, and then find a better bow pretty quickly once you are wandering around on the beach or in Act 1. For our second level, let's level up here. We'll take a level of Ranger. The level of Ranger means that we now have one spell slot because Paladin and Ranger each count as half a caster level. Because these are partial casters, they each give us 1/2 of a caster level. So we're now a level 1 spell caster with 2 levels, 1 in Paladin and 1 in Ranger. We don't know any spells yet, but it's important to note that we have this spell slot because we can make quite a bit of use of that as we go. For our favored enemy, this doesn't matter a ton. It's basically what skill do you want. I think Keeper of the Veil has probably the best utility just because protection from evil and good is reasonable, but pretty much pick whatever skill you think is most useful here. And for Natural Explorer, the best one is Wasteland Wanderer Fire, but you could also take Urban Tracker if you want Sleight of Hand. I recommend, though, that you bring Astarion alongside this build. In fact, I recommend bringing the Astarion build that I posted early last week, so go watch that video if you haven't seen it. I think it's called Best Assassin in Baldur's Gate, because what this character will not be bringing to the table is high damage output, so a really high damage build like that one will serve you really well as a companion. For your other companion, you probably want a sustained melee damage character like Karlach or Lae'zel, and then a full caster who should almost certainly be Gale, because this character does a reasonable cleric impression, so you don't need Shadowheart as badly as you would otherwise. We also get to add in a ranger skill. If you have perception from a racial choice, you don't need it. Otherwise, that's probably the best one to pick, although stealth also can be quite useful. At level 3, we get to take Cleric, and Cleric gives us a couple things. Cleric is just a great 1-level dip for any character, so this character as a martial character will play pretty well with Cleric. And it also gives us the Thaumaturgy cantrip, which will give us advantage on intimidation checks, which we'll be making in combat, Guidance, which is one of the best spells in the game, and then for your last spell, you can take like Resistance or Light or Blade Ward, whatever you want. The only important spell to have prepared is Bless, or actually there's 2 important spells to have prepared. You want Bless, and you want Healing Word. Give me Bless. Why is Bless not showing up? Oh, because I had it on my domain, because I didn't switch my domain yet. That's why. You want Bless and you want Healing Word. These are your sort of major utility options in combat. Bless will allow you to sustain a buff during combat, and characters effectively have 4 resources every turn that they can use in combat. You've got your bonus action, your movement, and your concentration. So we want to be maximizing our use of every single one of those effects at any given point. So we want to be concentrating on a good spell. Since this character will be a support caster, Bless is excellent to help our allies. For our subclass, we're going to pick Light Domain because 5 actions, rather. Our movement and our reaction is the other important resource that we have every turn in combat, because we want to have a good reaction. Light Domain gives us Warding Flare, which is one of the best defensive abilities in the game. It's effectively the same as having +5 AC, although even slightly better because it prevents critical hits. For our deity, it doesn't matter. Selûne gives you a couple extra role-playing options, so maybe pick that one. But the important thing is that you pick Guidance, pick Bless, and pick Light Domain Cleric. If you want to lean more towards damage output, I don't recommend that, but you could do Tempest Domain and have a reaction since you'll be tanking, or Knowledge Domain for be a more skill-focused cleric, but Light Domain as a defense-focused cleric is going to be the best. At this point, since we are level 3, we'll almost certainly have arrived at the Druid Grove and gotten access to the first important item of this build. In the Druid Grove, you can buy from Auntie Ethel there the Elixir of Hill Giant Strength. She restocks 2 every day, so stockpile these before leaving Act 1 or before removing her from the Grove, and with the Elixir of Hill Giant Strength, you can drink this every morning to have 21 Strength. This is why we set our Strength to 8 off the beginning, but now we're actually a totally reasonable melee character with like a +1 weapon. We actually hit for an okay amount of damage. We can also do decent, decent unarmed attacks if we have to. We have really good jumping and pushing, so our mobility is good, and we can push enemies into like walls of fire or off of cliffs. So that's where a lot of the utility from this character will come from while we're sustaining Bless. For our 4th level, this is where the build really comes together. We get to use kind of a trick that Baldur's Gate lets you do. Notice that we're a level 2 spellcaster right now, so we have access to level 2 spell slots. We have access to level 1 spell slots currently. If we take another level in a caster level, we'll have access to level 2 spell slots. Normally this wouldn't matter that much, other than upcasting level 1 spells, except that if you take Wizard, then Wizard will give you access to level 2 spell slots, which you can then learn level 2 spells, because wizards learn spells from scrolls. Which cantrips we pick? You'll probably want Mage Hand and Minor Illusion. Those are going to be the best. Maybe Friends, something like that. Again, steer clear of ones that have save DCs. And the only really important spell to have, I recommend Magic Missile, but Shield is going to be really important. It gives you another reaction defensive ability. And then some day-long buffs like Enhanced Sleep and Long Strider, maybe False Life, Fog Cloud is great utility, stuff like that. Anything that doesn't require a save and will give you some utility. But the important thing is that because we are now a 4th level spellcaster, or a 3rd level spellcaster at level 4, we have level 2 spell slots, which is going to allow us to learn level 2 spells. So with this, for example, Scroll of Misty Step, we can learn it, and now we can, as a wizard, cast level 2 spells. We can learn something like Knock for extra utility, and that will be really important. But we only have 8 intelligence, so this is where the other important item to the build comes in. In the abandoned village in Act 1, there's a trio of ogres. The leader of the ogre, Lump the Enlightened, has this warped headband of intellect. You can either kill him or negotiate for the ogre's services and get them killed in a difficult fight. Sometime around level 4, this should be relatively possible, and then loot this headband of intellect off his body. Now, all of a sudden, we have 17 intelligence and are a totally respectable wizard for the rest of the game. This is going to be really important because we can continue to gain levels in spells that as long as we continue to take spellcasting classes. At the end of the game, we're going to be a level 6 spellcaster because we're getting half a level each from Paladin and Ranger, and then we're going to get 1 level each from Cleric, Wizard, Sorcerer, Bard, and Druid. So, to make sure that we maximize our spellcasting options, what we're going to pick next is Sorcerer. Sorcerer is really good here because you can take the Storm Sorcery subclass, and Storm Sorcery gives you the Tempestuous Magic feature. This means whenever you cast a spell, almost always in combat Bless, although sometimes you're going to be casting Magic Missile, you can fly. You can use this to reposition your character next to enemies where they can draw aggro. Since this character has a base of 20 AC using just normal full plate and a shield, as well as both the light cleric defense and the shield spell, you're going to be very hard to hit. So enemies that attack you are actually really good for this character, especially in the early game. Your AC will your defensive abilities will start to fall off near the end game, but for the early game, you're actually a very respectable tank. You have Healing Word and you have healing. Sometime around this level is when we're going to reach our power spike for this build, or our power peak for this build, and then it'll start to fall off as we go through the next 6 levels. But with this ability, we can now reposition. What spells we pick here, I'm not too worried about. You could take like Disguise Self, something like that. Whatever cantrips you don't have, doesn't really matter. But the important part is that we now get access to Storm Sorcery. Finally, to round out our spellcasting levels, we're going to take a level of Bard. Bard mostly just because it gives us access to another skill, so we could take Deception, we could take Sleight of Hand if we still need that, we could take... Bard gives you any skill, so whatever you're missing from your party, you can pick. I'll assume we pick Deception for now. It also gives you a couple other good utility spells, like Disguise Self, Speak with Animals, which we don't currently have access to and is nice for a party face, and so on. Again, anything that requires a save DC, you're going to want to avoid, because your save DCs will never be good. But now at level 6, we are now a 5th level spellcaster, which allows us to learn level 3 spells. The most important level 3 spells, because we want to be sustaining a spell in combat always, is Haste. I actually don't have a scroll of haste, so the role of haste is going to be played by this scroll of fly here. But we can now learn level 3 spells starting at level 6, so we can learn haste or fly, other concentration utility spells that are extremely powerful, and keep that or bless up in combat. Sometime around this point, around level 6, we should also get access to another item that's really worth looking out for, so I wanted to highlight it. This, I think, is in the Temple of Selûne under the Goblin Camp, although if someone knows exactly where to find this item, you should please correct me in the comments. This Staff of Arcane Blessing makes your Bless give an additional 1d4, doubles the effectiveness of Bless. So since what you're mostly going to be doing in combat is casting Bless and then walking up to tank for your allies, having the Bless have a double effect is super powerful. If you equip the Staff of Arcane Blessing, you can now be concentrating either on Bless or Haste, whichever is better for that fight, or whichever is more useful. A couple other spells that are really worth looking out for. If you want damage, Cloud of Daggers is actually pretty good. The defense will... The save DC will not be super high because you have 17 int, but it's really good as a concentration spell that just does damage over time, and you can kind of hedge people in place. You can push them into it using your very high strength from the elixir, so I recommend something like Cloud of Daggers. Knock is also a really good utility spell to have access to, although since I suggest bringing Astarion, you probably won't need Sleight of Hand. As we continue to level up, at this point our build has more or less come together, so the order of the levels here doesn't matter as much, but I recommend for level 7 that we actually steer away from the spellcasting for a little bit, and just get a little bit more HP, and some defensive options with Fighter. Fighter will allow us to take the protection fighting style, since we have a shield always, and that lets you protect your allies with disadvantage as well as helping them. If you don't think you want this, you can take the defense fighting style. I recommend steering away from the offensive fighting styles, because like I said, without feats and without access to extra attack, this character is never going to be outputting a ton of damage, but you can be a pretty solid defensive utility option for your allies with protection. Next, just to get us another level 3 spell slot so we can cast Haste twice a day, we'll just go into Druid. Druid also gives us a couple cantrips that are fine. Produce Flame is actually pretty good. Poison Spray is fine as well. And Goodberry is another pretty good way to add some healing utility to your character. For the most part, though, at this point, this is just for a level 3 spell slot. Next, I think you can probably go into Warlock as the most utility here. You won't be killing stuff, so the Pact of the Fiend isn't very good, but you do sometimes attack, so Pact of the Great Old One. The DC on this Frightened effect will be very low, since it's based on your Charisma, which will not be very high, but it just means some extra dice for your opponents to roll every turn. You could easily, at this point, reorder the last 4 levels, maybe take Barbarian if you want more HP, maybe take Rogue if you want the 1d6 of sneak attack. Rogue also gets you some extra skills, so that's always nice, but I think that the best pick here is Warlock, mostly because it also gets you Armor of Agathis, which is a totally reasonable boost that you can have every level. The 5 cold damage on enemies that hit you will be a reasonable way to increase some damage. Hellish Rebuke is also fine. Hex has no save, so this is a really good way to increase your damage output. So probably just take these two. Then I recommend taking Rogue, because Rogue gives you access to expertise in... It gives you 1 more skill and expertise in 2 skills, so you can gain Persuasion expertise or Sleight of Hand expertise if you're your lockpicker at this point in the game. You could move Rogue a little bit earlier if you wanted to. You could move it down to level 8 ahead of Druid and Warlock if you really want these skills, but I think that this order is going to serve you best overall. And then we take Barbarian. Barbarian, unfortunately, does not have a lot of synergy with this character because you're going to be in full armor, so you can't use the unarmored defense, and Rage will turn off your concentration spells, so you can't use Rage for this character. You could do a version of this build if you think it's going to take you a little longer to get the Headband of Intellect, where you take Barbarian at level 3 and delay your Wizard level for 1 level, and then you can Rage and hit things as one of your early combat options. And finally, we're going to finish it off with Monk. Monk, unfortunately, for this build brings nothing to the table because you won't be unarmed and you won't be unarmored. You can do some damage with Flurry of Blows plus Sneak Attack dice, but for the most part, you're going to want to have a weapon that provides some utility, something like this staff or a Defender's Flail that gives you +1 AC. Something along those lines will be your best bet. Obviously, for your shield, you're going to just want to find the best shield you can use, and the best armor you can use will be heavy armor. Putting it all together, we have a character, we have a character that has 103 HP, which is not bad for a level 12 character. I mean, it's not incredible, but it's not terrible. You have 20 base AC, or 21 if you went the defense style for fighter, and you have a bunch of defensive reactions, which will allow you to bring a bunch of utility to the board. You can also spend most of your turns in combat concentrating on Bless or Haste, allowing you to help your allies out a lot, and you can push and throw stuff for extra damage or removing enemies in combat. Alright, my friends, hope you enjoyed this look at this pretty goofy build, but I thought it would be really fun to try to do a tactician-viable jack-of-all-trades build, and so I think we actually managed it. If you do end up playing this, please do let me know how it goes. I have not done it myself, because it just seems like a lot of time to spend on a rough build like this one, but let me know how the build plays out, and go get that sweet achievement. Alright, my friends, thanks so much for watching, and as always, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please do feel free to leave a comment, rate the video, and both of which help out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do those things. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks, and I'll catch you next time.